Thank you so much for tuning in to today's show. It is Street Talk. It is a special edition of a continuation conversation with our public service men and community service women here today on today's show. Again, it is a continuation, and they are here to let the community know that they care and they want to hear more from them. Also, they want you to know that they will be addressing your concerns here in the community. You're watching this edition of Street Talk here on Cable TV. Thank you again for joining with us today on this edition of Street Talk with our public service community members here that serves you in the community. They're here to let you know that your safety is a priority and your concerns matters. So without further ado, we're going to bring on again, we want to thank Phoenix City Chief of Police, Mr. Ray Smith. Thank you for being with us again today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Absolutely. Also, we have NAACP President Jasponica Florence Moore. Thank you again.
Thank you as well.
And also Russell County Sheriff Heath Taylor. Thank you again.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having us.
It is always a pleasure to have you all on, and you're here because you want the community to know that you care, you're wanted to address their concerns, and you want them to know that you're approachable. So that's why we're having this continuation of this wonderful conversation. We got great reviews from the first one, and so that's why they're here, and they will be coming periodically to share with the community and to inform. So we're going to get right into it today, because the last time what we did is share questions from citizens in the community regarding their concerns or just questions that they had. As you all know, our country has been experiencing a great deal of unrest, so which has sparked a lot of conversations that you may have seen and will continue to hear on this edition of Street Talk. So we're going to get right into it. One of the number one questions that is just circulating around, and I know you all have heard it, it's all about police reform. Are we advancing towards that direction of police reform?
Well, obviously we definitely are, because you can't live in a bubble, and even in our community, in our environment where we have relatively low crime and we have good community support, we definitely still have to respond to what's going on around us and what's going on nationally. Even the recent executive order signed by President Trump that did a number of requirements for police reform. One of those requirements that we took hold and notice of is that for future grants, future financial assistance from the federal government, that police departments, law enforcement agencies would either have to be accredited by an outside agency or be in the process of becoming accredited. And that's something that the Phoenix City Police Department had been looking for a long time. And we recently have just signed a contract with CLIA, and it was in the council 2-3 council meetings ago. And so we are currently in the self-assessment phase of accreditation. And basically what accreditation is that we can say as a police department or as a city that our policies are sound, and our practices are sound, our training is up to date, and we can try to make that case to the community. But it's always better to have an outside agency, an outside organization to come in and look at our organization and verify that those do exist and those things do happen. And then not only is it just the police department or the city making that argument, but this outside organization is as well. Many people know and have heard of law enforcement agencies across the country being under a federal consent decree, or they were sued by the Justice Department because of practices and policies that they had in place that were seen as either biased or unfair. We would rather have somebody come in and give us that assessment without being under, quote, a consent decree. So that's why I think this is a good step for us, because now we're inviting somebody in to come look at our agency without having to be forced to. Again, the consent decrees are very difficult to because you're behind already as soon as it happens. So this will hopefully not only continue to make us better, but make us more transparent in the process. So that way that the community can see. And obviously, we definitely want to make sure that we stay current and we stay able to get federal grants, because federal grants do go a long way in helping our community do the things that otherwise we wouldn't be able to do, like provide the citizens with top quality law enforcement services.
Good. That's good to know. And again, like I said, the last conversation we had a great review from that episode, and the community was just very, very grateful for the conversation. We're going to get into this next one. This is what is considered as a hate crime. Who can speak to that?
Well, I mean, I can speak to it generally. A hate crime is something that the law enforcement, the district attorney deems is a specific target group. It don't have to be black against white or white against black. It can be the homosexual communities. It can be against any group that has their own identity and somebody commits a crime against them for just that purpose. So, hate crimes are stuff that are looked at all the time, and that's why every crime that happens against somebody, just because the victim is black and the offender's white, that's don't necessarily fit a hate crime. So you've got to really look at the intent, the specifics, what caused it, what they did, the reasoning behind it. I mean, all those things come into play when you're dealing with a hate crime. It's not just the gender or the nationality or the race of the victim and the offender. I mean, if that was the case, I mean, every crime would be potentially a hate crime. So there are specific guidelines that the law sets out that we have to follow. And a lot of times those conversations are had by the DA's office to make sure that you can prosecute and justify meeting those criteria. And it becomes difficult from time to time.
Also, they wanted to know, does Alabama have a hate crime law?
We do.
And what are the penalties? I mean, kind of pretty much.
The penalties vary in range, but it's typically a felony status of a hate crime, and it would be an enhancement to the crime that they've committed, whether it's an assault or some type of shooting or beating. It's an enhancement to that. So it's a serious, it's serious time and serious enhancement to our Alabama laws when you start pulling in the hate crime.
Yeah, it's very similar to like the sheriff said, a major assault or felony assault may be punishable by 1 to 10 years. But when you add an enhancement like the motivation was because of hate, because of a race, religion, sex, or gender, then that makes an additional 2 to 5 or 2 to 6 or whatever the particulars of that particular crime calls for. So if the judge were to give you, okay, you're going to get a year for this assault, but because it was motivated by hate, I'm going to add an additional 5 years on top of it. So that's what that enhancement means, how that works.
Makes sense.
And I would just add, the NAACP, of course, bears the responsibility of helping to be, if you will allow me to use the term, a watch guard in the protected classes that both gentlemen are speaking of. And so that's one of the areas that the NAACP does actually step up, not to influence any decisions, because of course we have to adhere to the law on both ends, and it is the prosecutorial's judgment in terms of what proceeds at that point in terms of whether or not this case is charged as a hate crime. But a lot of times that's where the NAACP can help hone in on those protected classes that we know our Constitution bounds to protect and allows us to reinforce as we go forward.
Awesome.
And if I can just speak to the first question before we
Yes, sir.
get too far gone and I forget what I was going to say.
Yes, sir.
That comes with old age. when we had our first meeting, one of the things we talked about was at the state level for the state of Alabama to change the way our officers who leave from one department to the next. I have had some conversation since then with our legislators and with our APOST, the Alabama Peace Officer Standard Training Facility that manages that. We are intending on changing and putting some legislation in this upcoming legislative session that will enact the ability when a officer is fired from a department. The intent, I think you're going to see, is every department will be required to submit the termination to APOST, and they will suspend that person's ability to be a police officer at another department if it was a termination that fit certain criteria. If it was abuse, if it was things like that, excessive force, then they can't just go to another department and become a police officer at another department and nobody's talking to anybody and the state don't know it. Because currently that's kind of the status that we're in Alabama. And so since our first conversation, when we talked about that, Ray and I, we said that that's something that we want to see change because we've both experienced terminating people and they go to another department and get another job and potentially hurt somebody else. And they don't contact us. We don't know they're getting hired there. You just find out through the grapevine. And so I was pleased in the conversation that we've had at the state level with fixing that problem in the state of Alabama. And it's not, it's everywhere in the state. Georgia does it a little better than we do. I don't like saying that, but it's the facts. They already kind of have that system in place. And so, I think that you're going to see when March comes around that in the next legislative session that will be put in place.
So that means we're making progress.
We're making progress.
We're making progress, and that's what the conversation is all about. That's what the conversation is all about. I love it. Thank you for sharing that, Sheriff. So, and that's an encouragement to the community as well. Again, like I say, Phoenix City and Russell County is truly being proactive. And when I walked away from the first conversation we had, I was proud of Phoenix City and Russell County because I saw that you all are being proactive, not so much as reacting. And that there is a difference in that. This next one is in regards to, of course, with all the Black Lives Movement that has taken place and the citizens and community is very concerned. This one is, there are concerns in regards to having peaceful protesting with legal permit, and they're concerned about intruding protesters coming in with weapons. Now, from my understanding, when I received this, the scenario is they have permits to peacefully protest, but they are concerned about intruders coming in with weapons. And they want to know, how are we prepared? How will our law enforcement handle a situation like that?
Well, we're going to, if we're invited to be there at the event, we're going to protect the people's First Amendment right and allow them to protest. And we're not going to not show up and let somebody hurt the protesters. If they have done it the right way and they've got the permitting and they're doing it peacefully, then we're going to be there to let them have that protest in the best way possible and the safest way possible for them and the community too. So I think they just have to stay in touch with us. If we don't know about it, it's tough for us to be there. And then you're put in a situation where if somebody shows up and there's a confrontation, now you're calling us on the back end and we're trying to get there and get in the middle of it. But I think it's just, keep us updated, keep us on the forefront of it, let us know the dates and the times and the places, and we'll be there to assist.
And that's the purpose of having a permit. You got legal rights to have the protests.
And to follow up with the sheriff, the process, it doesn't cost anything, so it doesn't infringe on anybody's rights. You don't have to pay any money for it. And the way the permitting process works in the city, it's very easy. You come to the police department, you pick up a form and you fill it out. And we ask for a 2-week notice. If it's less than 2 weeks, we can work with you on that. The key then, again, it's just communication. And the reason we want a 2-week notice is just like the sheriff said, we want to do some intelligence gathering. We want to find out if there's going to be any appetite for a counter protest. Working with the organizers that want to have the protest or have the peaceful demonstration, they may know things that we don't know, and so talking with those organizers, say, is there anybody out there that wishes you bad or wishes you harm? So we can go out and research that. I mean, we know how to use social media, we know how to go out there and look at that, and we can hopefully track and see what to expect. We've had good conversations with other agencies around us. I don't know if you remember, but Auburn had a demonstration that involved counter protesters just a couple of years ago. They used intelligence and they used good solid police work to counter that, and was able to get law enforcement in between the peaceful protesters and the counter protesters that were there to try to cause trouble. And after maybe 2 or 3 arrests of the counter protest, it fell apart and it became what it was supposed to have been, a free speech activity to voice whatever grievance or point of view that they wanted to get across. And it was heard, and I think it was successful. So again, communication, it's not trying to, a pop-up demonstration may be something that you think is very helpful and organic, but if we don't know, and that pop-up other people can read on the Facebook too, and they can, get that counter protest rolling. We don't care what protest it is. You could be for the police or against the police. We're going to let you protest either way, because that's your right and your First Amendment right. Whatever your voice that you want to get heard, we're going to make sure that that's heard, and we're going to protect that for everybody.
Absolutely.
And also I'll add, just from the community standpoint, the NAACP, of course, is a national organization which has rules and guidelines that we must follow as well. If we are petitioning in the county area or in the city, we have to follow the protocol that our nationals has put out as well, so that we are protected under the insurance and liability clauses that follow for us. And we also must keep in mind that there are persons who, again, they can read on Facebook, they can see the news media, they can follow those things, and they have an intent that may be different from what your intention is. And so the biggest piece is communication, but it's also following the guidelines. Individuals can do so, but when you are collective in a group, then you of course have a fellowship, and then you also have more notoriety that attracts certain entities. And so being able to have that conversation and talk it out and work through it, and also being flexible enough to have to make an informed decision or a change, has to, of course, be part of that. That was one of the number one questions that we kept getting after George Floyd and all of the other incidences that have unfortunately taken place in creating this environment of civil unrest. And the number one question is, what is the intent? Everything has to have a mission. Everything has to have a purpose. What are you protesting? What is it that you want to bring out of that? There has to be a real guideline behind don't just do something to do something, because when you're not organized, you don't plan effectively, you aren't openly communicating, then you create sometimes an environment of chaos and confusion. And that's where people can get hurt. And we don't want that. So we want to make sure that there is that open line and that we do follow the expectations and guidelines.
Well balanced. See, you all have put it very well. And this one, NAACP, Dr. Florence Moore, what are some factors of inequality and how to properly address it?
I'm just old-fashioned and raised by my parents and grandparents to believe that common sense is not common. And so I have to sometimes catch myself, because what was common in my house may not be for others. And a lot of times it's just the rearing, it's just the mentality, it's just the outcome, the lack of education or the lack of knowledge that forces some decisions. Poverty is a mentality. And so if I only make $500 and I have a rent that's due of $800, my mentality may tell me to use 200 of those on some shoes versus putting that 500 aside until I earn the next check to go with that and to actually pay the bill. And so there becomes the educational piece behind that. And that's a teaching tool. It baffles me that we're barely at 60% of people completing the census here in our county, because we know that when you complete the census, there's money tied to that number that brings in resources like additional officers or Boys and Girls Club. There's a lot of things that are attached to that. But because some people do not recognize that or see that, they do not have that understanding or that education to realize it, then that becomes a teaching tool. Well, I'm a teacher by nature, and so it's always important for me to educate, to inform, to try to explain so that the understanding is there. And when you seek to understand, you get better at what you're trying to do, and you're willing to hear all sides, and you're willing to make some decisions. And so I think that is primarily how we would respond to that.
Absolutely. That's good. That's good. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and we're going to share some more questions and concerns from the citizens here in the community. You're watching it here on cable TV.
You don't have to be so strong.
Strength is not optional. This is my mother, my purpose. Real muscle is lifting her spirits between bedpans and bad news from doctors that doubt her strength. Strength is buried in bills, managing meds, and swallowing those moments of, Mom, it's me, your daughter. Remember? My strength is super, but I'm still human, right?
Find support for your strength. Visit aarp.org/caregiving for care guides and community.
Welcome back, and thank you so much for tuning in to today's show. We have our public service leaders and also community service leader here, sharing with the community and answering and addressing your questions and concern. Thank you all again for being on today's show. We're gonna get right back into the questions. This one is probably in regards to law enforcement. If our local police department became overwhelmed and our local sheriff office became overwhelmed due to community unrest, is there a combined plan of action for both divisions?
Well, I can tell you from the police department standpoint, we monitor demonstrations and even protests very closely, or anything, even if it's permitted or not, so that we can make sure that we stay ahead of it. But we talk to our counterpart across the river in Georgia. I know that you probably realize, and the community has probably seen, Columbus has had a number of demonstrations, and when those happen, we definitely call the authorities on that side of the river. We know them well, and they know us, and we make sure that we're trying to stay coordinated. The sheriff and I will probably make 4 or 5 phone calls over the course of that day to try to make sure that everything is coordinated and is taken care of, and everybody's safe, and the demonstrators are able to get their message out, and the businesses and the community remain safe. So we've been very fortunate in our area, but we're of course not naive enough to think that people from the outside of the community couldn't come in and cause us trouble and overwhelm our resources very quickly. So we've coordinated both, again, between the sheriff and the police department. We keep in constant contact, but also we have resources at the state level. Not to brag or drop names, but one of the chief of the uniform division of the state troopers used to be a Phoenix City police officer. We trained her, and she's now the chief of this. So we have a very close relationship, and we call Susie Capps and say, look, hey, Susie, we got this situation coming up. Anything that you can do to help, we appreciate it. And certainly she's going to make sure that she's got the resources to bring those to bear. And Phoenix City, Russell County hasn't really had to call on those lately, but you've seen it happen in other cities like Montgomery, and I think in Mobile that they had state ALEA officers go to assist even those larger departments. So it is a plan in place. We definitely work with the state level agencies, but there's other resources available too, all the way up to the governor's office. And so hopefully we'll never have to use those in our local community. And if we ever have to, we'll know it won't be because of local people. It'll be because people from the outside have kind of overwhelmed our resources.
The biggest thing that you see when that occurs is natural disasters. When we get overwhelmed, it's because tornado hit, hurricane hit, and we already have in place mutual aid agreements with the sheriffs around the state, the police departments around the state, the LEA, the state law enforcement. So we have mutual aid. We have mutual aid with agencies around the country. A couple of years ago, I sent deputies to North Dakota when they were having their protest about the Indians and the land and all that went on for months. I mean, we sent deputies to help those deputies, in North Dakota. So we have mutual aid in place, and if anything ever were to happen in Russell County, Phoenix City, we have the policies and procedures in place that we would be able to quickly get whatever resources we need here in our county.
Wonderful, wonderful. Awesome. Now, this next question is in regards to gun stores. Are gun stores supposed to report their sales of firearms?
The gun stores report their sales to ATF, and they have to do that by law. They don't report them to me or the chief. The things that get reported to me from a gun store is only if somebody buys a silencer or some type of silencer, like for a handgun or a rifle, that comes to me, and we keep that on file at the sheriff's office as to who has a license to have that, because you have to get a license for that. So, but the gun stores themselves, by law, are mandated to report every sale to ATF.
And ATF is alcohol, tobacco, and firearms.
Okay.
And
All
we
right.
do, and we do work with ATF. There's a lot of times when we make arrests with people with guns that have committed a crime with a gun, we'll package that case and send it to the ATF. They can then trace that gun, where it was purchased, how many times it's been transferred. And if it needs to be, they can actually add a federal crime on top of it. It's one of those enhancers to make that crime more, give you more time for committing that crime with a gun. One other thing, other than the silencers and things that gets reported to law enforcement locally, is gun dealers themselves. The actual federal firearms license holders, they also report locally. So as if they're in Phoenix City, I get a copy of that FFL. Sheriff gets it if it's in the city or in the county. And the reason for that is not so much to monitor the number of gun sales. That's because we as a department need to know that there are guns stored at this particular location, so we try to give it a little more extra security to make sure that it doesn't get broke into. Or if we do get a call that it has been broken into, we can pretty much rest assured that we've lost some guns in a burglary, and that's when we'll call our partners at the federal level, ATF, to come in and help us investigate those kind of crimes. So that's kind of how that works. So it's managed at the federal level at an individual sale, but we do have some intelligence at the local level about who is selling guns and what kind of guns, if they're licensed silencers and things like that.
And is there a limit to the number of firearms allowed per household?
Not in Alabama, no ma'am.
Not in Alabama. How about ammunition? Does that have to be reported as well?
No ma'am. There's only, I think, Teflon coated ammo and there's certain types of ammo, armor piercing and Teflon coated, but those are the only ammo. Other than that, no, there's no requirement.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's a couple of ammunition manufacturers that has to be reported when it's sold, and the chief mentioned it. Teflon, armor piercing, those types of ammo, that has to be reported. Short of that, there's nothing reported on ammo. There's no amount that you are limited to have. I mean, there's no amount.
Okay. Also, this question is regards to law enforcement as well. Do we have an intelligence division or unit?
As a standalone unit, not in my department, but we do have, there's a fusion cell, they call it a fusion cell, it's attached to the state, and it's at the state level in Montgomery that we do communicate with on a daily basis. And in our criminal investigation unit, I have an officer assigned to communicate with that fusion cell to get intelligence, and that intelligence comes from ATF, it comes from Secret Service, it comes from all the federal partners, and they kind of distill it out and send it out. We do keep in close contact with the FBI agent in charge out of Mobile that covers our area. I email him probably twice or 3 times a week. He emails me twice, 3 times a week to let me know what kind of intelligence are coming through. So a standalone intelligence, no, but we do keep in close contact with the clearinghouse for intelligence. And I always laugh because I'll usually get the LEO bulletin or the for law enforcement use only bulletin, and by the time I read it, it's going to be on CNN in about 15 minutes. So it's pretty close. I don't know if that's your experience, Sheriff.
We're basically set up the same way. I mean, we have our investigative division, and they monitor as much local stuff as possible through social media. You know, we're monitoring social media for certain things, for sex offenders and for, you know, child predators and things like that. But we don't have a specific one person or 2 people that are intelligence only. We do the same thing that the chief does. We're tied into the state intelligence division, and they are constantly sending us things that relate to Russell County or Phoenix City, and we work through them. We have people on the state task forces, and so we're constantly monitoring the intelligence side, but it's not in a traditional intelligence division of the department.
Okay. All right. And this next question is in regards to an incident that occurred in Colorado. And some of citizens are concerned about what happened there, and just concerned if this scenario was to happen here, how will it be handled? In Colorado, cops handcuffed kids during a mistaken traffic stop, and the children range from ages 6 to 17. Well, when I got that question, I immediately thought of trauma, you know, with the children. So they want to know, what are standard procedures for arresting citizens when children are involved?
Well, certainly there's common sense. I think Jasponica talks about this too. Common sense sometimes isn't common. We certainly try to train our people and make sure they understand that handcuffing is specifically to control a suspect. So if they're not a suspect and they're not being taken into custody, there's no reason to, quote, control that suspect. And certainly there's got to be some common sense. You know, if an 8 or 9-year-old is not a threat, is there any reason to handcuff them? Now, granted, if there are weapons or problems in the area that you can't contain, and you know you've got an 8 or 9-year-old that is capable of getting, say, a handgun that may be in the area that you can't control at that particular time, you may have to restrain them. Now, is handcuffing the best way to do that? Maybe, maybe not. But it's certainly got to use some common sense. But we've talked about what juvenile means. Well, if you're a juvenile in the state of Alabama, under the law, you technically can't, quote, commit a crime, because you don't have the mens rea or the guilty mind. That guilty mind has to be when you're old enough to commit a crime that you understand the consequences of that action. So when juveniles do, quote, commit acts that would be considered a crime if you were an adult, they're taken to family court, juvenile court, to be rehabilitated, not to be punished. Adults are punished. Juveniles are, quote, rehabilitated, and that's a big difference. We try to protect their record. We don't hold that against them when they get older. It's something that's happened in their juvenile past. That's their juvenile past. We have, you know, counseled them and rehabilitated them to the point that when they become adults, they aren't committing those same acts, because if they did, they would become, quote, a criminal and carry that stigma that nobody wants to put on anybody. But you try to get that early on. So to answer your question, in a short answer, we would hope that you wouldn't handcuff a 6-year-old. It's not in our policy to, quote, handcuff 6-year-olds, because technically a 6-year-old's not going to be charged with a, quote, crime. Mm-hmm. But if you're a 14 or a 15-year-old that needs to be taken into custody, it's it's quite possible that you could handcuff them, and probably should, depending on the circumstances. It goes back to the same thing that we talked about, I think, in our first. Depends on the crime, depends on the severity of the crime, depends on the size of the child, depends on the danger to the officer in the area. There's a lot of considerations that have to be taken into account. But it's just like use of force. It has to be reasonable. If it's not reasonable, again, that reasonableness needs to be kind of looked at on a case-by-case basis.
Wow.
You know, the first thing I'm going to say is it's extremely difficult for me to Monday morning quarterback what somebody else done, because we don't know what the information was. We don't know what they were thinking. I saw the video. The video that I saw bothered me from the sense of just what we were looking at on the TV screen. I'm like Ray, I wouldn't suggest that we start handcuffing kids, but I would also tell you that in my 33 years, I've arrested an 8-year-old for distribution of cocaine in our area that was, you know, in the middle of the drug dealing and everything else. So just the fact that they're 8 years old, you still got to use common sense. And, you know, you would think that 6 or 7 or 8-year-old is not a danger to somebody. And we would certainly want our officers to be mindful of cuffing them and laying them on the ground and that type of scenario, because I don't know that child will ever trust an officer again, no matter what happens. So yeah, you certainly have to play it case by case, but we would not like to see that historically be a norm. There may be the occasion that has to occur for safety of everybody at the scene, but you just don't want to think that that's what we've got to resort to.
And how do you handle because one of the concern is when you have to do a traffic stop or pull someone over and they may have to be arrested, how do you handle children that are in the car? How is that handled?
Well, again, it's certainly a case-by-case basis. You certainly don't want to, quote, traumatize the children. You want to make sure that you're, approaching the situation as calmly as possible. But a lot of that is obviously dictated by the person you're stopping. And to go back to an example that Heath gave, there was a situation that happened when I was a young patrol officer. It happened in Columbus. And you may remember the officer's name, that he was a police officer that had found it was a 13-year-old boy that had run away from home. He found the young boy on the street in Columbus and, put him in the back of the patrol car and carried him home. He wasn't handcuffed, but before he got to the house, the boy had shot the police officer through the back of the seat of the police car and killed the police officer. So, he's 13 years old. Should he have been handcuffed? He definitely should have been checked for weapons, for sure. And that was that's a hard lesson that we as law enforcement have to learn. That he may be 13, but you still have to check him for weapons, and then you have to kind of make that decision: is this child a threat to you or others? And sometimes the answer is yes, and you do have to take steps to secure the child. And if that means handcuffing, then it may be that's what you have to do. So you do have to make that.
But to answer your question about the traffic stop, if unless it's just an all-out fight, I mean, if I stop you for a traffic stop and you have a warrant on you, there's no reason for me to be upset with other people in the car. I mean, I'll put you in custody, and I'm going to be polite to the people in the car. I mean, we're going to try to make sure they get home safe and make sure they understand that the driver had a warrant or whatever the circumstance was. But I mean, to answer your question, just because somebody goes to jail in the car doesn't mean that the rest of the people in the car have done anything wrong and should be treated with anything other than respect and try to help,
But also in the case, if minors are in the car and there's only one adult driver, you all would use the other agencies at the DHR, or
we would call other family members. If they're old enough to say, hey, my mom's at home, can you call my mom? I mean, we should be, at that point that they're secure, we should be trying to
Get 'em,
to
yes.
help the people that's in the car that we're there with now and make sure they get home safe.
Yeah.
It's not against policy. So we many times have made an arrest and other people in the car needed a ride somewhere they didn't have a ride to get. They may have even been adults. Well, we've taken them to their house, to wherever they needed to be. I mean, we're not going to leave them on the side of the road. Matter of fact, it's obviously you don't want to leave somebody on the side of the road after you put somebody in jail. You want to make sure that everybody else got where they needed to go, whether that meant calling a family member to come get the children or a friend to come get the other friend that's an adult that doesn't have a driver's license or can't take the car because we may have had to impound the car for one reason or another. So yeah, it's not guaranteed everybody in the car is going to jail just because somebody got pulled over. And a lot of times, most of the time, and one of the things I try to have passed on to my folks is, if you do have a bunch of people in the car, there's nothing wrong with trying to get the driver to your car and have the conversation back there. You don't need to, embarrass them in front of, you're driving to, let's come back here and let's talk about the offense that I stopped you for. And if it's just a traffic citation, write the traffic citation and then they can go back to their car and move on. So, certainly it's not our point to try to embarrass or to demean people that we stop. We're just trying to correct a problem that we came across.
And I think they were, when that initial question, people were concerned because I think it was a parent, the female, she was a parent or an adult family member. And because she, I believe was handcuffed and they all were on the hot pavement. And so the little kids were handcuffed as well. And from my understanding, the kids had a lot of commotion. It was just, traumatized by the experience. And so we wanted to share that so that the community will know that our local law enforcement here, this is community policing. That's why we're having this conversation, to let you know and help you to understand that, they are mindful of all of this that is happening around us as well. And because it happened, somewhere else doesn't necessarily mean it will happen here, but we do understand your concerns. But they're here to let you know that they're open to hear your concerns and they want to be able to bring ease to your mind as well, to let you know that they care. And when you have to pull someone over, you're gonna handle it with dignity as well. And that's what the people, I think, really want to know and feel and hear. And
to add on to that, if anybody gets pulled over and they felt like that they weren't handled with dignity, that's the other message that we want to make sure people realize. We're here to listen to that complaint, and we investigate all of them. And we look at every case. And even if you don't get a complaint, or if we don't get a complaint, it's a constant review. Supervisors review cases every day. I review reports every day. It's not, decisions aren't made, quote, in a bubble, or they're not just a one-time off. They're over and over reviewed, and not just by our agency. Sheriff's Department sometimes is called in to look at a situation that we may be dealing with, or even the state to look at a situation that we're dealing with, not to rubber stamp our decision, but to concur or to say, no, you've got some issues that you need to correct here, and we have to be open to that scrutiny to make ourselves better. So we can't always say that we're never going to make a mistake. We can't say that we're never going to make a mistake, but when we do, we want you to let us get a chance to help fix it or get a chance to correct it. And then we'll take that same situation like we've talked before in the past and put it right back into our training manual and train. This is what happened in this situation. This is why it didn't go so well. This is what we think we should do better in the future.
And you all do that very well, very well.
We try.
Well, we're going to take a final break, and when we come back, we're going to have some closing thoughts from our panelists. And again, like I shared before, they're wanting you to know that they care, they hear your concerns, you can share it with them. That is why they're here. We'll be back. You're watching it here on cable TV.
Hi, I'm Russell County Probate Judge Alfred Harden. I'm speaking with you today about the 2020 census and how important it is to our community. You don't think that's important sometimes until you see all the new roads and bridges, all the new recreational facilities that we have. Public safety is first and foremost on all of our minds. We want our families to be safe. One way we're able to do that is through being counted in the census so that we can get federal dollars to make sure that these gentlemen are trained and that they have top-notch equipment. Stand up and be counted for Russell County.
Thank you again for joining us on today's conversation with our public service leaders and community leaders. And we're about to bring the show to a close, but before we close out, I got a couple of more questions. This has been circulating all around social media everywhere and on news network as well. Defunding the police. Would you like to speak on that, about defunding the police?
Well, one of the things that people sometimes, when they hear defund the police, a lot of times they hear that coming from, say, a national politician or a federal level politician. And one thing that I want to make sure that our community knows is that law enforcement is not funded mostly by feds. It's 90% of law enforcement is decentralized, which means that it's controlled locally by the county and the city. So the city council, they dictate the budget of the police department locally. The county commission, they dictate the budget for the sheriff's department and the jail for those services. So when you hear cities talking about defunding, those are decisions made by local politicians, not by the federal or even the state governments for that matter. Actually, when you hear people talk about, withholding funds from the federal level, that's because they're a sanctuary city, and that whole federal argument, which is a whole different conversation altogether. So again, communities get the police department that they want because they really do control how that police department is funded. Now, the other things that go along with the defunding conversation, social workers and mental health, I'm 100% behind that because local social services and local mental health agencies for years have been decimated. That's a state level problem. The state is the one that typically funds those organizations. And without the state stepping up and building those organizations back to full strength and partnering with law enforcement, for example, we have a great working relationship with Russell County DHR and Lee County DHR for the police department, where we work cases together on a very common basis. But we have very little resources when it comes to mental health. The sheriff typically is, and he'll speak to the mental health side of that, he typically is responsible for taking mental health people to the mental health facilities by order of a judge. But that's where we see a lot of gaps in trying to provide good quality services to the community, is that mental health piece. So that definitely needs funding. But as far as defunding, it doesn't make sense, because when you start defunding, the first thing that happens is you start defunding the salaries and training of good quality employees that will go out and do a good job. And if you are dissatisfied with the level of performance of a particular agency or organization, one of the best things you can do is spend a little more money to get better training and better quality employees into that organization to get it to where it needs to be. So that's my 2 cents on what the defunding police means and how that works.
I think the community needs to understand the implications of that, because you hear it, but you really don't understand all that it entails. And I think we should be investing in our.
And two, from a common standpoint, your common non-law enforcement worker, or even understanding that when I hear, or some people hear the term defund, they think it's going to wipe the police department out. Well, we know in that particular situation, without rules governing us, laws and order, then we have chaos and confusion. We already have, in my opinion, too many senseless shootings, too many violent episodes and situations that if you embrace the idea of defunding and actually can imagine a world without it, then that to me looks like heaven on earth. And I would love that, but we just don't have everyone in that state of mind. We don't have everyone in that particular mindset to live in that kind of environment. So we have to have some levels of order. We have to have guidance, and we have to have the rules that are there for us to follow. And if we don't, then we're going to be in a much worse state than I don't even want to imagine.
Well, I agree with what both of you have said. I mean, the conversation, when you start having problems in law enforcement, in my opinion, it shouldn't be defund it, it should be increase it. Increase training, increase quality of people that you hire, increase the pay so that you can attract a better character of a person. I think there's only certain things that you can defund when you talk about defund the police. you can either defund training, you can defund people by cutting salaries and cutting positions. I mean, the rest of it, equipment and cars, I mean, you know, that goes along with the personnel that you have. So when you start talking about defunding, you're actually saying less police, less training, you know, and that just don't make sense to me in the conversations that we should be having about what went on. I don't think anybody thinks that there's too many police officers in any community. I mean, you know, I just don't see that. There's not an abundance of police officers in every community in the country. So I think it goes back to, you know, your initial reaction is let's defund the police, let's take things away from them. I just, you know, the common sense side of that should come into play and say, no, you know, what we should do is train better, hire better character people. You know, one or two bad apples makes everybody look bad. And so if you can help weed out those one or two bad character people, then the whole group is going to look better. And to me, that's more of the conversation that should be had.
As well. Sounds good. Also, as our final question, do we have officers in schools, all schools?
I've got an officer in every school in the county. Most of them, 3 of them are full-time and the rest are part-time, so they only work during school hours. But I have an officer, a sworn officer, deputy in every school in the county.
Okay.
And in Phoenix City, we have one at the high school, one at the junior high school, one at the middle school, and then one at the freshman academy. So we have 4 officers at the 4 big schools that have every student in the city at. All the elementary students, they don't, or the elementary schools don't have a full-time officer on site all the time, but there is a roving officer that does go from school to school to check on physical security. And to, you know, further talk about SROs and how they kind of interact with the schools, SROs, school resource officers, what primarily their responsibility is physical control, actually securing and making sure that that environment is safe for the students and the teachers and administrators working at that school. But what that entails, that of course entails getting to know the students, looking at social media, making sure that they're looking at intelligence, what kind of things are coming in and out of the school, both with as far as cars and equipment, that kind of thing. So it's a huge job, because you're talking about a campus sometimes for the city schools, you know, there's a couple thousand people at some of the bigger schools. That's a lot of personnel to watch over and a lot of territory to watch over. But the school resource officers and the administrators of the school work very closely together. They get to know these kids. They get to know what problems and situations, and that really goes back to what community policing is. It's a partnership, understanding what the needs are of both the citizen you're serving as well as the organization, the agency that you're serving. It's just a partnership.
Absolutely.
Well, I just want to say that I'm very appreciative of the community that we live in. We have an open dialogue with all parts of our community and every section and our civic organizations. And so, you know, from my perspective, I'm extremely happy to live here and to have the opportunity to serve this community, which I think is a great community, and we have so few problems when you look at the big picture around the state, around, you know, our bi-state, our neighboring state with Georgia, and we just have so few problems, and I'm appreciative of that. And I ask the community to continue to, you know, reach out to us with any problems that you have, but continue to love one another and not just be so hateful. And I think we've done that here, and it's just a blessing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said. Thank you. Thank you for your service.
Yes, ma'am. I will co-sign what Sheriff Taylor has shared, but I will also add that as the NAACP, we are a community watch guard, and one of the great things that I love about my hometown and our home county is that ill intent is not easily identified. So there may be a situation where you felt like you were wronged, or you felt like you have been placed in a situation where your hands were tied. The one thing that I do love about this community and the people that are in it is that when those things do occur, there's a remedy that doesn't have to resort to chaos and confusion or mass destruction, and we just have to sit down and talk about it. And that's one of the things that I love about the NAACP and the opportunity that we have to be a listening ear. Sometimes it's a matter of not understanding. Sometimes it's a matter of not getting in or not knowing the procedure to do so. And so having a community organization that is able to reach out, we have relationships with our city and our county leadership. We're able to have conversations. We're able to sit at the table, meet at the minds, and come to some type of consensus. And so that's the one thing that I'm vowing to continue as a leader of the organization, to stand in the gap for those who are not able to get their message across, to help the most vulnerable populations, those who do not have an advocate, and to be able to reinforce that. I'm grateful that we have listening ears. I'm grateful that we have a strength of over 100 people behind us to help us. We're always looking to grow members, of course, but I'm grateful that we have the opportunity to be able to be heard and to let our voices be known.
And it's a blessing to know that we have that in the community and that you all are available and you're putting yourself out there. This is such a blessing.
That's right. And I think to just Ponica's point, I think this is really important to understand that I personally, as a chief of police, certainly am blessed to serve at this particular time and to have so much time invested in the city. But I'm not naive enough to know that there's people in the community that still may not trust me personally, or may not trust my officers or trust law enforcement in general. There may be people who've just moved from another community that trust wasn't valued or wasn't something that they worked on, and so they may not want to come to me and tell me, hey, I've had a problem, I've had an issue, I felt like that I've not been treated fairly. Well, that's okay. Go to Cedra Sponica. She's the NAACP. She's your advocate. Mm-hmm. And she's got my number, she's got the sheriff's number, she's got every community leader's number in her book, and she can call us and we can, like she said, she can advocate for you, and she can say, Chief Smith, this is what this person is saying happened, and then I can go and investigate. And if I find problems, then I can be held accountable. My department can be held accountable, and we can make those corrections so that future generations don't have to deal with these same kinds of issues.
I love it. You're holding one another accountable. I love it. Wow. So, Facebook page?
We have a Facebook page, Russell County Sheriff's Office Facebook. We have a website, rcso.org. So, any of those avenues that you want to contact us through, we welcome that.
And your social media outlets?
Yes, so we're Phoenix City, Russell County, NAACP 50/50. And of course, if you go to the state NAACP, you get my personal number. And so you're able to reach out. I don't think anyone doesn't have my number, so.
Praise God. Thank you.
And yes, we have a Phoenix City Police Department Facebook page. We also have a police department page, and on that police department page, I would encourage you to look at all the ways that you can communicate with us. We also have a police app that you can download on your phone. You can send crime tips. You can report an issue for traffic. You can tell me an officer did good or did bad. You can do any of those things through that police app. It also is connected to the weather app to kind of let you know if the storms are coming, so you can get your updates there. And something I'm really proud of that we're working on, and actually this came about during the pandemic, is that we are implementing a online reporting system very soon. It's actually up now, and if you want to go and look at it, if you open up the phoenixcityal.us page, bottom left-hand corner, you'll click where it says police reports. Now you can either order a report that you've either filed, whether it be a rec report or an incident report. You can now order that online and have it emailed straight to you. And all you can also file a report, certain circumstances or certain cases, whether thefts or something like that. A non-emergency, obviously. If it's an emergency, pick up the phone, call us 911. But non-emergency cases that you say, I just need to file a report for insurance purposes, there's a spot now that you can do that over the internet and be able to do that. So I encourage you to look at our webpage, look at our Facebook page, and look at those upcoming announcements. We're going to hopefully make it a lot easier for you to communicate with us. And one thing I want to make sure, again, even if you don't trust me, I can assure you, those crime tips, if you push the crime tip button on our app, that app is purely anonymous. If I wanted to check your IP address, it's already stripped off. You can come and if you want to have your tech people come look at it, they'll come look at it and I can show you exactly how it looks. I don't have an IP address, don't even have an email address. The only thing I get is a crime tip with the information that you want to divulge to me that I can go and look things up. So we hope that we can build some trust and build some transparency by having those tools available to the community, and certainly look forward to developing many more as the years go by.
And this is how it starts, conversations like this. Thank you all so much. Again, this is how it starts. We are partners. These are our community partners. And just like the chief just said, he wants you to be able to trust him, trust the department as well. They are a blessing to our community. They really are. And I am so honored to be able to be in this place, to be able to have this conversation with them and to bring it to the community, because I get to see what a lot of people don't get to see. I get to see their hearts behind their service. They are here because they wanted to be here. They wanted to be here, and they are a voice for the community. So again, they are here for you. Your concerns matters. They want you to know that they care, and we are all in this together. When they say that we are all in this together, it is really, really true. So thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your comments. Thank you for sharing your concerns. Continue to send them in because they want to hear from you. And again, get to know them. These are our community leaders, our public service leaders, and they are a blessing. I cannot say it enough. So thank you again for tuning in to today's show. Remember, life is all about what you make it, that what you put out, it will come back. You've been watching this edition here on CTV Beam.